Hey, what's up guys, Matt here. This is a Samsung Galaxy Note 3, the newest device in Samsung's Note lineup. This is a very interesting phone because as you can see, it's a very large device. But besides its form factor, this phone actually brings some pretty interesting new features to the table. Samsung essentially took the framework of the Galaxy S4 and matured it, giving it new features and changing the design a bit. The Note 3 is still a plastic phone, but the build is quite good. Up front we have the same controls that we would expect, including a home button and capacitive menu and back buttons. The sides are made to look like a metal band wrapping around the phone, which is somewhat convincing, and there's the lock button on the right and the volume rocker on the left. Up top we have the headphone jack and the IR blaster, and at the bottom we have a speaker and one of the new features on the Note, which is the new USB 3.0 connector. Essentially all this does is allow for faster charging and sync speeds when you have a USB 3 port available and are using the included cable. But if you lose that cable or you just don't want to use it for whatever reason, it is backwards compatible with micro USB, so you don't have to worry about that. This is one of the few remaining phones that has a removable back, which means you can swap out the massive 3200 mAh battery or expand your storage using micro SD. Down on the left hand corner you can see the stylus, and up top you see the 13 megapixel sensor. Now this phone is actually quite comfortable to hold, mainly because Samsung got rid of that slimy plastic and replaced it with this. No, that's not leather, that is plastic that's made to look like leather. Up close it looks like plastic, and it still feels like plastic because, well, it is. But this phone actually feels very good in the hand, especially for its size, and it really surprised me. The screen on this phone is massive, coming in at 5.7 inches. It's a 1080p non-pentile AMOLED display with 386 pixels per inch. It's the best AMOLED screen I've used, although it still has the typical issues like extremely oversaturated colors, and it's still pretty hard to see outside. But besides those things, the screen is extremely sharp and makes everything you do on the phone look pretty great. Inside this phone is an absolutely crazy spec list. In the US variant, which is the one I have, it has a Snapdragon 800 quad-core processor clocked at 2.3 GHz, 3 GB of RAM, and an Adreno 330 GPU. And basically what this translates to is an absolute beast of a performer. Now I'll be the first to tell you that specs don't really matter, which I stick by, but this phone is a great performer and handles everything I throw at it. It's fast and responsive, and although I did notice some stutter here and there, I attribute that more to software than the processor. Overall, the phone performed great and exceeded my expectations. The battery life on the Note 3 is also crazy, coming in at 3200 mAh. To put that into perspective, the iPhone 5S battery comes in at 1500 mAh. Yeah. Now with that massive size, you would expect excellent performance, and I have to say that this is the best battery in a phone that I have used. The battery lasted me all day pretty easily, but it needed to be charged an hour or two before I went to bed at night. This is still great performance, but it really isn't the battery to end all batteries. With heavy use, you're still probably going to have to charge it every single night, but because of that removable back, you can just buy extra batteries and swap them out if you ever need to. Now the camera on the back is the same 13 megapixel sensor that is found on the Galaxy S4, which would lead you to assume that it's a pretty good performer, which it is, but interestingly the photos are not quite as good. There seems to be some new processing being done to the photos, adding a ton of sharpening and noise reduction. The colors are decent, but it really depended on what situation you were in, and the low light was just not very good at all. The photos overall just look overprocessed, making what should be a sharp, noise-free picture look sharpened and denoised, a subtle but major difference. Moving over to the video side, however, is where this camera starts to shine. It still shoots 1080p, which looks great, it's very sharp, and the colors are very vibrant, but the US variant of the Note 3 now shoots 4K video. Yeah, 4 times the resolution of 1080p on a phone. Now being the first iteration of this, the video actually looks amazing even though most people can't actually watch it in its native form. It's super sharp and looks awesome, and I'll leave some test video down in the description below, so go check that out. The only issue I see in video mode is the lack of image stabilization, and because of this the video is very shaky, and because of the detail in 4K it's very noticeable. But overall the camera is pretty good in both stills and video. It's definitely not the best I've used, but it certainly isn't the worst. On the software side of things, the Note 3 is running Android 4.3 Jelly Bean, which is the latest iteration, but also has Samsung's touch-wiz skin laid over top of it. Now you may know that I'm really not a fan of touch-wiz at all. Nothing really seems completely thought through or executed to the best of Samsung abilities. It just seems like a ton of stuff thrown into one software bundle, which I still stand by, but to my surprise I really didn't mind it here on the Note 3. I think the main reason behind that is because of the S Pen. Yes, Samsung wants the stylus back, and although skeptical, I actually used it quite a bit. touch-wiz adds a ton of S Pen optimized things, my favorite being the new Air Command window that pops up and gives you shortcuts to different apps. I found myself actually reaching for the S Pen more often than not to jot down quick notes in a rush, and being a big Snapchat user, the S Pen was great for fun little drawings on pictures. Besides the S Pen stuff, the rest of touch-wiz is pretty much untouched. You still have the same Air features introduced on the Galaxy S4, and everything's pretty much laid out the same, just bigger. Now, I did seem to have some weird bugs and a lot of crashes. The biggest bug being that Watch On, the app that lets you control your TV, would not turn off no matter what I did. There was just a lot of little weird things like that hopefully can be fixed through an update. So who is this Note 3 for? Well, this is a big phone and a two-handed phone for most people. If you're someone who only uses their phone to consume media or surf the web, then I think this phone will suit you quite well. But if you're someone like me and are always on the go, I would give it some thought. Let me explain. When I'm at home, this phone is great. I have two hands to use the phone to its fullest extent. I actually rarely even use my tablet anymore. But when I'm out of the house is where the problems start to come in. I'm usually carrying a bag or a drink or just generally only have one hand available. And when I want to use this phone, I have to put everything down and dedicate both my hands to it because for me, this is a two-handed device. My hands are relatively small and I physically cannot use this phone with one hand. It's not a choice, I just actually cannot do it. So I have to use two hands, and if you're like me, then I don't know if this phone is going to be correct for you. But like I said, if you're a person who just uses your phone for media and social things, then I think this phone could be great because it's a huge screen and it really can take place of a tablet and a phone all in one, so that's a great thing. Also, on a small side note, a lot of people look at this phone and say, wow, that's not going to fit in my pockets. And I have to say, for me, it actually fits in all of my pant pockets, but there's one pair I have where this barely fits, and it's very uncomfortable to walk around with. I can barely sit down with it in my pocket, so that is something to be wary of. If you're looking at this device and you plan on putting it in your pocket, make sure your pockets are plenty big enough. This phone is interesting. There really isn't anything inherently wrong with it. Pretty much everything it does really well, and that's a great thing. I really like this phone, and if you're in the market for something like this, hands down the Note 3 is the one I would get. The advantages over the S4, like the stylus and the better battery life, are very real and are definitely something to consider. Overall, I really think this is one of Samsung's best devices to date, and it's really a joy to use, even though I still hate touch-wiz. So that is my review of the Samsung Galaxy Note 3. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, it would be awesome if you can give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, my name is Matt, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya!